We started in the previous lecture our discussion in the activity-based costing. And we said that the activity-based costing is a method or a costing system that could be used in order to refine any costing system. So, what do we mean by the activity-based costing? Of course, we said the activity-based costing starts, first of all, by analyzing the processes and the business functions within the organization into different activities, which is the step number 1. And then we need to analyze or determine, according to these activities, the different cost allocation bases. Of course, as we said before or in the previous lecture, that these two steps could be done within the same time, simultaneously. Therefore, we are going, or for instance, if we had an analysis of a costing system or a business process or a manufacturing process with thousands of activities. But at the end, we need to group up all these activities, of course, first of all, according to the different cost allocation bases, and also we need to group the activities according to the cost-benefit analysis, because we do not need a highly complicated system, because if we have a highly complicated system, that means it would be more expensive for us to run this costing system. This expense or this high expense of running this costing system would make it less cost effective. Therefore, two things we need to consider in analyzing the business process into activities and determining the cost allocation basis, that we need to group up all the activities with the same allocation base, and also we need to choose the activities according to a cost-benefit analysis in order not to overcomplicate our costing system. Of course, after we determine the activities and their corresponding cost allocation basis, we can determine the cost of these activities or these different activities. Of course, after determining the cost allocation basis for the different activities and determining the cost of these activities, we could
calculate the budget.
Excellent. We calculate the budgeted allocation rate. Of course, the budgeted allocation rate would be calculated according to the following equation, which is the cost pool or the activity cost pool divided by the number of total units of the allocation based, of course, for the same activity. After calculating the budgeted allocation rate, what would be the next step? What do you mean by indirect cost? This is a vague word. This is a vague answer. Be more specific. After knowing the budgeted allocation rate, excellent, we would allocate the costs of these activities onto the different cost objects, whether they are programs, whether they are courses, whether they are products, whether they are services, and so on. Therefore, after this step, we can allocate the costs of these activities or these different activities onto the different cost objects. Of course, this is what we discussed in the last lecture, and of course we went through with the example or the case of Plastem Corporation, and we said that Plastem Corporation faced the problem of having a higher price than the competition. That means they are facing a problem of losing market share. And we said that this problem might be because we do not have, or Plassim Corporation does not have the ability, does not have the efficiency in order to produce this product or the S3 lens in an efficient way. And also we said another possibility that we might have a problem in our costing system. Of course, as the case said, as the case states, that according to a team of engineers and managers, they found out that we have the ability, that we have the productivity, that we have the efficiency and the technology that is available in the market. Therefore, we do not have any problem in lowering our cost, or we do not have any problems in our productivity or efficiency. Therefore, we found out, on the other hand, that the profit margin of the S3 is small, while as the profit margin of the CL5 is high. That was a puzzling piece of information. Why? Because according to the team of managers, they said that the S3 or the corporation or Plassim Corporation has a lot of experience in producing the S3 lens. And on the other hand, it does not have the same experience, it does not have the same efficiency in the CL5. Therefore, the situation is quite the opposite of what we expect. We expect, according to our experience, that the S3 should have the higher profit margin, while the CL5 or the other product would have the lower profit margin. But the fact is, according to our simple costing system, it is the opposite. We have the opposite situation. Therefore, they concluded that we need to try and refine our costing system. And of course, one of the tools, as we said, in order to refine our costing system or our simple costing system is by the use of ABC. And we said in the last lecture or in the previous lecture that according to the analysis of the business processes and the business functions within Plassim Corporation, they came up with different 7 activities. One of these activities, of course, they took these activities and then tried to refine according to the 3 steps that we said earlier in the previous lecture. We said in order to refine any costing system, we need to trace more direct costs. That means we need to reclassify indirect costs and try to classify them into direct costs, of course, in a cost-effective way. We need always to consider that this tracing should be in a cost-effective way. The second step that we could use in order to refine our costing system is to increase our number of cost pools. That means we need to have more and more homogeneous indirect cost pools, because as we said, as the number of cost pools increases, the accuracy of our allocation would increase, and the group averaging or effect or problem would be decreased. The last step that we could use or we could implement in order to decrease our inaccuracies or in order to refine our costing system is excellent. Trying to refine the use of our cost allocation bases. Because we said in chapter number 3 in Cost Accounting 1 that the allocation base or the cost allocation base should have a cause and effect relationship with the cost itself. Therefore, the cost driver and the cost allocation or the cost allocation base and the cost itself should have a cause and effect relationship. That means a change within the cost driver should affect change in the cost pool or the cost itself. Therefore, these are the 3 steps. And after the team of managers and cost accountants and of course management accountants came up with this list, of different activities, they started with the steps of refining the costing system. And we said that they found out that activity D, which is cleaning and maintaining the molds after lenses are manufactured, could be traced in a cost-effective way to the specific products, which is the CL5 and the S3. Therefore, we, in this case, decreased our indirect costs and increased our direct costs. Therefore, decreased the, let us say, the possibility of inaccuracies and increased our accuracy by decreasing our indirect costs and increasing our direct costs. Correct? Any questions?
Maybe we have a higher cost or higher price for another reason.
Which is?
Like maybe the suppliers or our supplies is different than their
Excellent. This is a possibility. But this possibility was stricken out according to the case. The case said that the team of engineers, they found out that, and the team of managers and engineers, they found out that we have the efficiency, we have the productivity, therefore we do not have any, let us say, other factors other than our costing system. Therefore, here the case only focuses upon the costing system itself in order to see what is the advantages of the ABC. But you are 100% correct. Of course, we might have some efficiencies problems. We might have some, let us say, more costly operations, more costly suppliers, more costly raw materials, and so on. This is 100% correct. Excellent. Therefore, according to our case, we found out that D, or cleaning and maintaining the molds, because as we said earlier, that the molds of the CL5 is different than the molds used in the S3. Therefore, the cleaning process here is different than the cleaning process here. The maintaining of the S3 molds is different than the maintaining of the CL5 molds. Therefore, they said, the managers said, that we can trace these costs effectively or in a cost-effective way for the S3 and the CL5 separately. Therefore, we are going to increase our direct costs by this cost. And then we would have 6 different activities after, of course, eliminating D and reclassifying it into direct costs. We would have only now 6 different activities, therefore 6 different cost pools or indirect cost pools that needs to be allocated onto the different cost objects or the different products, the CL5 and the S3. Of course, the first activity is the designing of the product and processes. The second is the setting up of the molding machines. C is the operation of the molding machines. E is the preparation of the batches of finished lenses and the preparation for these lenses to be shipped. F, distribution of the lenses to the customer. G, the administration and the managing processes of all the functions within the organizations. These are the different activities within this costing system. Therefore, let us now take an example of how to use the second step and the third step in order to refine a costing system. We said the first step is to trace more and more direct costs. We did just that in tracing D and reclassifying it into a direct cost. Now we need to increase the number of cost pools, and as we can see here, the use of the ABC, the use or the classifying, or let us say the analyzing of the costing system into these different 6 cost pools did just that. That means, according to the simple costing system, how many cost pools did we have? Only one. All indirect costs were gathered up, were grouped up only in one cost pool. But here, after the use of ABC, this cost pool was divided into 6 different cost pools. And of course 7, but the 7th would be reclassified as a direct cost. Therefore, step number 2 was done by this analysis of different activities. Now let us take an example of how we are going to use the step 3, which is the choosing of the cost allocation base. And we said that the choosing of the cost allocation base should be done according to some criteria that would enable us to be sure that there is a strong cause and effect relationship between the cost pool and the cost allocation base or the cost driver itself. Therefore, let us take the example of the setting up of molding machines. What do you think here could be the allocation base? The wages of trucks, or the drivers of the trucks? The drivers of the trucks. But how is it relevant here to the setting up to the molding machines? We are not talking about shipments and distribution. I'm not saying that we are distributing the lenses. I'm saying here that we are setting up, we are tweaking the machines that produces the CL5 and produces the S3. So what would be, or what can we choose as an allocation base that has this cause and effect relationship, according, of course, to the 3 points that we took in Cost Accounting 1. We should have economic plausibility, we should have goodness of fit, and the dependent or the independent variable should be significant. Therefore, what could be our allocation base in this case? Excellent. Setup hours. This could be our allocation base. What else? Direct manufacturing labor hours could be. Why not? What else? Go ahead. Excellent. Number of setups. Do we have any other or possible other allocation bases for the setting up of the molding machines? Now let us consider the direct manufacturing labor hours. Do you think that it has more economic plausibility than the setup hours or the number of setups? Is it more economically plausible? Or do we think that the setup hours and the number of setups are more economically plausible than the direct manufacturing labor hours? Because as we can see here, if the direct manufacturing labor hours increases, that does not mean exactly that the setting up of the molding machines would increase by that same fact. Of course, it would increase, because as we all know, that as the direct manufacturing labor hours increases, the number of products that are produced would increase, correct? That means if the number of products or number of units of the products would increase, that means that the setting up of the machines also would increase. There is a relationship. We are not saying that there is not or there is no relationship between the two. But is it a strong relationship here? Is it a strong economic plausibility, or does it have a strong economic plausibility? As we can see, we can relate more to the setup hours, because of course the cost of setting up the machines would be more related to the hours that is spent in the setting up rather than the direct manufacturing labor hours, which is a vague cost allocation base. Correct? Also, the number of setups could also be an economic plausible way, or let us say allocation base, that could be used in order to allocate the cost of setting up these machines. Because of course, as the number of setups would increase, that means that the cost of setting up the machines would also increase, which is, let us say, a more direct, a more strong or stronger relationship than the direct manufacturing labor hours, which is a vague perspective, or a vague, let us say, a vague understanding, or a vague cost allocation base that could be used. Therefore, let us consider only the setup hours and the number of setups. When do we, or when can we use the number of setups as the allocation base, and when we can use, or when can we use the setup hours as the allocation base? What do you think is a better allocation base, and why? Go ahead.
Number of setups would be used when the way of the setup is the same. So the whole
Excellent.
Or all of it only.
Excellent.
When there's when it's simple, it would take less time.
Excellent.
To set up the molding machine. So we will do setup hours.
Excellent, excellent. Therefore, if in our setting up of the machines, if this process, which is the setting up of the machines, would use up the same resources for all the products, that means we can use the number of setups as the allocation base. Why? Because all the setups uses up the same resources. We do not have a problem in using the number of setups, because if we use 10 setups or 15 setups, each setup within this number exactly, or let us say accurately, uses the same number of resources. But what if, on the other hand, the setups for the different products uses up different resources? Yani, for instance, we have the S3 and the CL5. If we use the number of setups as the allocation base, that means we are assuming that the setting up of the machines used to manufacture the S3 is the same as the setting up of the machines used to manufacture the CL5. Correct? Therefore, this could be used if this is the case. But according to our example, according to our case, they said that the CL5 has a more complex design. Therefore, it has a more complicated process of manufacture than the S3. That means setting up the machines for the CL5 would be more complicated than setting up the machines for the S3, which means that the resources for setting up the machines for the CL5 which is used is higher than the resources used to set up the machines for the S3. Therefore, the setups or the comparison between the setups of the S3, or by comparing the setups of the S3 and the CL5, we found out that the resources used up by these two different products is not the same. Therefore, the managers or the team of managers said we are not going to use the number of setups. Yes, it has economic plausibility, but of course both have economic plausibility, but this allocation base has the more goodness of fit. This allocation base has more significance for the independent variable. Therefore, they said we are going to go through and use and choose the setup hours as our allocation base. Of course, this process of choosing among different allocation bases were done for each and every activity. So as we can see, we went through all the three different steps in order to refine our costing system. We traced more direct costs. We reclassified indirect costs into direct costs, which is step number 1. We constructed more and more or increased the number of homogeneous cost pools. As we can see, we have now 6 cost pools in comparison with only 1 cost pool in the simple costing system. Number 3, each of these processes or each of these activities were chosen or were related to allocation base that has economic plausibility, that has goodness of fit, and that has significance with the independent variable. That means that we achieved step number 3, choosing a highly related cost driver or cost allocation base that has a cause and effect relationship or a strong cause and effect relationship with the cost pool itself. Any questions? Now let us see how did they use this information to for exactly the setting up of the machines in order to allocate the costs of the setting up onto the S3 and the CL5. Because of course the main objective of any costing system is to what exactly? What is the main objective of any costing system? Whether it is a simple, whether it is a complex, whether it is the ABC or other. Excellent. Determining the cost of the cost object. This is the main objective. This is the main goal of any cost or costing system or cost accounting information system. That means we are not going to stop after analyzing the different activities. We are not going to stop after reclassifying indirect into direct cost. We are not going to stop after choosing the allocation bases for the different cost pools. Of course, these steps are very important, but this is only the beginning of any costing system. This is the design of the costing system. Now let us see how we can use this costing system in order to allocate the cost of the different activities onto the cost objects. Of course, according to the Plassim Corporation, two cost objects, the S3 and the CL5. Go ahead.
The direct material labor hours, can we say that we omit it because there's no exact straight line relation between the setup molding and the direct labor hours? They increase in the same time because of the third party manufacturing process.
There is a relationship. We cannot say that there is no relationship. There is a relationship between the direct manufacturing labor hours and the cost of the setting up of the machines. There is a relationship. And as we said, that as the direct manufacturing labor hours increases, that means we are producing more and more products, units of products. That means that as the number of units increases that we produce, that means we need more and more cost to set up these machines. But this relationship is weak. We have stronger relationships. Therefore, we go with the stronger relationships than with the weaker relationships. Any questions? Now, let us take also the example only. We are not going to talk about all activities. We are only going to concentrate on this activity, which is the setting up of the molding machines. As we can see here, first of all, as we said, after classifying or categorizing the different business functions or different activities within the organization and choosing the cost allocation basis, of course, and after determining the cost of these activities, we need to do what? We need to calculate the budgeted allocation rate, and using this budgeted allocation rate, we would allocate the cost of these activities onto the different cost objects. This is exactly what is to be done according or for the activity number 2, which is the setting up of the molding machines. Of course, as we just said, that the setting up of the molding machines would be allocated according to the setup hours of these machines. We are not going to use the number of setups. As we said, we are going to use the setup hours. Of course, first of all, we need, in order to calculate the budgeted allocation rate, we need two things. We need the activity cost pool, which is in this case, as they told us from the example or from the case itself, that the cost would be, I think, $30,000 or $300,000. The cost, according to our case, according to our example, is $300,000. Therefore, we determined the activity cost pool. Of course, the $300,000 is part of the all indirect cost that we have previously allocated using the direct manufacturing labor hours. Therefore, this is only a fraction of the all indirect costs. Of course, we need now, after determining the activity cost pool, we need now to determine the total number of units of the allocation base, which is in this case the setup hours. Therefore, they gave us some information that according to this information, we will calculate the total number of units of the allocation base. They gave us, of course, information for the simple lens S3 and the complex CL5 lens. Of course, they started with the quantity of lenses produced, which is a prediction, which is a budgeted number, 60,000, which is the same as the simple costing. It did not change. We are going to produce 60,000 units of S3, whether we are using the simple costing system or the ABC. This would not affect our, let us say, number of units to be produced. And the complex lens, we are going to produce 15,000 units of the CL5 lens. Of course, they said that each batch would have the amount of 240 units. Of course, as you can know, that the manufacturing process goes through according to batches. That means that after a certain number of units, we need to clean, for instance, the machines. We need to tweak the machines. We need to set up the machines. This is the definition of setting up the machines. Correct? Therefore, as the information here tells us that each batch of the sample lens would produce 240 units. While as for the complex lens, we only produce 50 lenses or 50 units per only one batch. That means each 240 units, we need to stop our manufacturing process, we need to tweak our machines, we need to clean our machines, we need to set up our machines for the next 240 batch or 240, let us say, units of the S3. The same thing is for the complex lens. Each 50 units, or after the production of 50 units, we would stop the manufacturing process in order to tweak our machines, in order to clean our machines, in order to set up our machines. Therefore, if we knew this or this information, if we knew that we need to produce 60,000 units and each batch would have or would produce 240 units, can we now calculate the number of batches that we need? Of course, 60,000 divided by 240 would give us the number of batches that we need in order to produce the 60,000 total amount of the S3 lens. Accordingly, also for the complex CL5 lens, we divide the 15,000 units by the 50, which will give us the 300 number of batches. That means we need 300 batches in order to produce the 15,000 budgeted number of units. Any questions? Of course, did we get our number of total units of the allocation base? We still didn't determine the number or the total number of units of the allocation base. We did not determine the total number of the setup hours. We didn't go there yet. Therefore, now, according to number 4, they gave us the setup time per batch. And as we can see here, the resources that are used for the different products are not the same. This is the same point that we have discussed earlier. If, for instance, we have here 2 hours as the setup hours, and here also we have 2 hours, therefore I can choose as the allocation base the number of setups. But because here we have more complexity, that means we need more time to set up the machines than the S3 lens, therefore we cannot use the number of setups as the allocation base, because the setup hours would be a more accurate allocation base. Any questions? Of course, if we know that we need 250 batches and each batch would need 2 hours, that means for the S3 lens, in order to produce the whole 60,000, we need how much? 500 hours. This means that we need 500 hours in setting up our machines in order to produce 60,000 units of the S3. Here, we found out that we need 300 batches. Each batch would consume 5 hours in the setting up. Therefore, in order to achieve, in order to produce the 15,000 total number of units, we need 1,500 hours to produce the CL5 lenses. Correct? Therefore, what is the total or the total number of units of the allocation base? Which is exactly the 2,000 hours. Therefore, we have determined the number of total units of the allocation base, which is in this case the total number of setup hours. Is this the end of the line? So what is the next step now? We need to allocate. We need to allocate the $300,000 onto the different products, the CL5 and the simple lens, which is the exactly presented here, which is the step that is presented here after the determination of the number of units of the setup hours. So as we can see here, they gave us a comparison between our simple costing system and our newly refined costing system. Of course, according to the setup hours, we would have an allocation rate how much? 2,000, which would equal $150. This is the allocation rate. As we can see here, it is presented by these two numbers. Therefore, now we need to allocate the 300,000 onto this S3 and the CL5. So the S3 consumes up to how much hours in setup hours? Only 500. Therefore, and each hour would consume $150 from the 300,000. Therefore, the $150 is exactly per setup hour. Therefore, if we need to allocate now and we need to determine how much cost that would be allocated to the S3, we would multiply the $150 per setup hour by the total number of setup hours that is needed in order to produce the 60,000 units of the S3, which is 500. While as for the CL5, we would use the same $150 per setup hour multiplied by the total number of hours that is needed in order to produce the 15,000 units of the CL5. Therefore, as we can see here, that the allocated costs for the simple lens is $75,000, while as for the complex lens, it is $225,000. Let us compare this information with the information according to the simple costing system. Of course, we said in the simple costing system that $60 is the allocation rate of all indirect costs. But here they only took the part of the $300,000. Therefore, according to the simple costing, the amounts is quite the opposite. It is really quite the opposite. Here we have 75,000 for the simple lens, and here we have almost 75,000 for the complex lens. Therefore, as we can see, because that simple lenses used up more direct manufacturing labor hours, it was allocated with more setup costs, which is not an accurate thing as we saw or as we determined according to the number of setup hours. Here, according to the number of setup hours, it is quite the opposite. Because according to the direct manufacturing labor hours, the simple lens used up 30,000 labor hours. And the complex lens used 9,750, I think. Yes, 9,750 labor hours. Therefore, if I'm using the labor hours, I would allocate more costs onto the simple lens than the complex lens, which is exactly what happened in the simple costing system, as we can see here. But now, after the refinement, after refining our costing system, after using the ABC and the activity-based costing, we found out quite the opposite, that the S3 uses up less resources than the CL5 in the setting up process. Therefore, the inaccuracy was in using this broad averaging method in order to allocate all costs by the same cost allocation base. Of course, something that you need to consider always, that whatever the method that we are using, whatever the costing system that we are using, it would not affect by any way our costs. As we can see here, the total cost of setting up the machines is 300,000, and here also 300,000. Therefore, the use of different methods of allocation, the different methods or the different cost allocation bases, the different costing systems would not affect the costs itself. It only would affect how we are going to allocate these costs. Any questions? Of course, as we can see here, we do not have enough time to present the next point. So inshallah, we are going to continue in the next lecture. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you in the next lecture.